What's up, boss man?
What's good? Happy
I,
Sunday.
I like the change in locations. Or I like the change in backgrounds.
Oh yeah, no background twice, bro. That's how we do it.
No background's the same.
Never.
How you feel?
Gotta
How you
gotta
feeling?
switch it up, you know. Every Sunday we're in a new universe, so
I respect
for
that.
the for the for the free folk, one of my favorite things that uh, I forget how long ago this came up, but in some conversation Eric and I were having about like parallel universes and dimensions and whatnot. Eric hit me with the game of like every day you wake up, you're in a new universe. So
Oh,
that's what I was
1000%.
alluding to
Dictated
there.
by the actions of the previous day, for sure.
Exactly. So today's universe, this is where we're sitting.
That's good to hear. I mean, it's a lot of good energy outside. A lot of good energy in the world right now.
Yo, I got
At least in
FOMO
New
from
York.
not being. Yeah, I got FOMO from not being in New York right now. It seems like the party was real yesterday.
What ended up happening was as soon as the results were announced, in congrats to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, um, yeah, people were just like honking their horns. People were screaming, clapping. It was similar to when everyone would cheer for the healthcare workers at 7.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was very,
I
yeah.
saw there's like block parties today and whatnot.
Oh, they're most likely because it's also like 70 something degrees in November, so
I
it's a
mean,
good time to be.
considering this year, it's like there hasn't been a lot to celebrate. You know, it makes sense. It makes sense. People are taking advantage when opportunities to celebrate.
Oh yeah, you have to. You have to. You gotta get outside when you can. Gotta get outside when you can. How's everything else in your end though? You good?
I'm good, man. I've been chilling, getting used to this time difference out here. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
got got my COVID test results. Came back negative, so feeling good
Okay.
this morning.
That's a
Yeah,
blessing.
definitely. I was I didn't have any symptoms or anything, but I was just like, let me make sure that you know if anyone asks, I can point to a result post travel.
To say no, I'm
Because pre
good.
because because saying it pre-travel, being like, yeah, I got tested, but like having that be before I hopped on a plane and flew to a new destination doesn't really mean the same. So I'm like, all right, let me make sure that
Not entirely.
I'm officially good to go. And at the moment, I'm officially good to go.
Well, that's good. Yeah, no, you gotta just keep the energy up. It's good. Your test results came back negative. I think that a lot of people are probably gonna have to go and get some COVID tests after this weekend, after all the different celebrations. Yeah, no, it's gonna be like that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Hmm.
I can imagine. But I mean, New Yorkers in general, like I feel like the type of folks who would be celebrating the election results that just came are also the type of folks who would generally be wearing masks
Oh yeah, no,
at said
everyone was
convocations and celebrations.
masked up yesterday. When I was going around and looking at the different celebrations and everything that was going on, a lot of people were masked up for sure. So no, it felt great. What's up, guys? How's everyone doing? But yeah, no, I think we can get started. Welcome back, everyone. Um, every Sunday, Zim and I, we come on here for a series called You Think, where we just discuss what's happening that previous week in the world. Today's topics we have is what now? So as we all know, Joe Biden has been, projected to win or has won and is the president-elect. And definitely wanted to just discuss sort of like like what's next as a country, as a community, as a people, and what can we do to continuously keep the conversation going.
Yeah,
I don't know if you wanna kick it off. I can kick it off as well.
you jump right in. I'll go second.
Okay.
I'll piggyback off of where you take us.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it's good. Like it feels good. There's something to smile about. And I feel like there's now a chance and opportunity for there to be room to discuss elements of change and progress. I feel like these past 4 years there were just a lot of steps I mean, a lot of steps that the country was taking backwards, and I feel like there wasn't a lot of positive that was coming out of it. There was a lot of um, fear mongering, um, elements of like different healthcare was cut. Like there was just it got to a point where it was like, is this really the direction that this country should be going, or is this the country that we grew up in? And I feel like a lot of things were at a point where like Trump's name was just so ingrained in these news cycles, and there was just like no way to escape it. And I feel like he was just like it felt like everything that he was doing and saying, like it was just like one after the other. So it's like you can still be upset for something that happened last week or even a week before, but in the end of the day, it's just like, all right, now we have something else to worry about now, you know. And I'm just very happy that I feel like there's now an open line of communication with someone or with people who will actually listen and push forth some positive change.
Yeah, I
You
mean, I
know?
feel that, and I definitely feel that, and I think the celebrations yesterday were super valid from the fact that, like, yes, the person who has been actively pushing against progress and who has actively been trying to take us back to the worst qualities of America, you know, being defeated in a way that is definitive and feels definitive, you know, like I think that
Mm-hmm.
is obviously worth celebrating, and um, you know, I think yesterday's was a very cathartic moment for a lot of people, and a very, you know, symbolic victory in that sense. But I also think, you know, to your point about like this open line of communication, I mean that remains to be seen, right? Like we don't really, nothing changed, like a lot changed yesterday, but nothing changed yesterday at the same time, you know, like and I
Explain.
think my
What do you mean by
biggest,
that?
like, you know, like the individuals who are most affected by the policies that you talked about, they're still affected by those policies today. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
there was any change in sort of the day-to-day reality for those folks, minus the potential for change being stronger. Like before there was like, oh shit, like where everything is stacked against us, like there's no real, the powers that be are actively working against us. Now there's like a renewed sense of optimism for sure, which is great to see. But at the same time, it's like I think in terms of a lot of the issues which were surfaced during Trump's administration, my concern comes from, and I think I'm at a place of cautious optimism, so I'm not overly
Yeah.
concerned necessarily at the moment. But at the same time, like my hesitation comes from, and we've talked about this before, like America loves to move the goalpost, and I think, you know, there is definitely a subsection of people who were celebrating Biden's victory in the sense of like, well, glad like the dark times are over and like things are normal again. And I think there's a very real question of like, well, what does that mean, you know, in terms of things being normal again? Like I saw a video of someone who'd been protesting, you know, over the past few months, and they were like, well, normal for me was I started protesting during the Trayvon Martin case, and that was before Trump. That was when Obama was in office, you know, that was when we had a black president. So, and that's obviously like a social justice issue, and there's like the same things can be true for economic issues and for a lot of other things where it is like, you know, just because we no longer have a overtly bigoted person in the office doesn't necessarily mean that the issues that we're pushing back on, you know, have been solved. And I think where we run the risk is like this fatigue of like, okay, finally, like Trump is gone. I do think there is a subsection of people who were like super woke and like talking about this stuff last year who aren't necessarily going to keep that same energy moving forward of like, okay, well
Mm-hmm.
now, you know, Trump's out of office. And I think where we run the risk there is then like we don't start addressing some of these things holistically, then you run into the thing where it's like, okay, 2024, another person like Trump comes around, and because so many Americans are still dealing with like harsh day-to-day realities, they're like, oh, they just, you know, like we just start swinging on this pendulum back and forth without actually addressing real issues. But again, I am
Yeah.
cautiously optimistic, but I think that is just something that's like, you know, the other side of the celebrations of yesterday is like, how are we going to keep this momentum moving forward without necessarily having like as clear of a figurehead of like as like an enemy or as like someone to rally against, you know?
And I think also too, I don't. we can't really discount the fact that like Trump, he was going to get rid of a lot of people's visas as well. So that's also a lot of celebration came in
Mm-hmm.
as well. Like people just realizing like, hey, I can actually like continue my life here. I was speaking to a friend yesterday. He was saying that him and his fiance, they were going to end up moving to Canada because of that. You know, so I think that it was not only a celebration to not have this figure of hate at the head of state, but also just like some of the policies that he was going to enact over these next few months and possibly these few years would have directly impacted people's livelihood, if not already, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
So I
I
think
mean,
that
I
that's
think
also where a lot of the celebration is coming from. And of course, it's just like we have to continuously keep the conversation going. But I think that it really got down to a point where, I mean, even if we look at the results, I mean, there were like millions of people who still voted for him after these past 4 years. You know, even if he didn't fulfill any of his promises. When we're looking at like the Bible Belt, for example, and all of the promises for change and like draining the swamp, like none of that actually happened. And those people were still like pushing forward him to be in office. It was interesting too because I saw a tweet and someone said, "I've never seen." It was like I don't understand how Biden won. I've never seen people have or wave Biden flags around. And then someone was like, "Well, because we also realized like how kind of dumb that looks at a point too." And it's like this presidency or at least this election, like it was being treated as like the allegiances were like sports teams essentially. You know what I'm saying? Like people just wanted to win at all costs, no matter what the policies of the individuals who they were voting in.
yeah. Well, I mean, I like the sports team analogies because like one thing I saw going around with this was this idea of like don't mean a thing without the ring, you know, as they say, and it's like this idea that if it is a sports team analogy, we didn't win the championship, you know, we won, we like made the playoffs, right? Like
Yep.
there's still so much left to be done on that end, but I do think that now is like, you know, I did watch Biden's speech and I did. Um,
I missed that
you know, I
yesterday.
think like
What was he saying? What was the general
well,
general
I
message?
think one of the things which he really touched on was this idea of like, I mean, he like quoted the Bible of like, you know, like there's a time for this and a time for that, and now is the time for healing in America, and like, you know, kind
Mm-hmm.
of bridging these gaps. And what I think we will start to see a lot of, um, certainly from certainly warranting a lot of criticism, I think, from more progressives, is going to be, I think we're going to start to see, like, because of the fact that Biden was a candidate who was partially there to appeal to folks who have, you know, for instance, voted Republican their whole life, who would never have voted Democrat until this moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see that his administration really is built around sort of bringing in like everybody back to the fold, as in like folks who it's going to be like for instance the John Kasichs of the world. Like I think a John Kasich is going to you know probably be involved in this administration. I think that is a strategic and in some ways like even though I think a lot of progressives would be upset about that in some senses, like I do think that is a strategic move in the sense that like yeah we do really need to start coming together and recognizing that like at least for now like we're all we're all in this country together and like our
Yeah,
the
because America, it's
success.
the United States of America. Like, there's no red, there's no blue. It's like if we, and I think I was mentioning this before, if we just function as just a unit and want to just win and become number one in infrastructure, healthcare, education, it's just like that's going to benefit everyone at the end of the day. You know?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like the delicate balance that we need to be able to maneuver is like we do need to bring everyone together and heal and like you know the last 4 years have been a lot and we do need to you know start to move past that. But at the same time, like moving past that without addressing some of these issues that have come to light, you know, I think that that is a real concern because it's like if you are trying to appeal to, for instance, like you know Biden talked about, I'm going to be a president for people who, for all of Americans, even the ones who didn't vote for me. Well, I think is a subsection of people who did vote for him who would hear something like that and be like, well, for you to be a president for the people who didn't vote for you, in some ways interferes with my ability, like with my livelihood, because a lot of the people who didn't vote for him are like the people who are you know directly challenging the livelihood of like people of color and things like that. So I think that's where the challenge comes is like how do we bring people together but at the same time not just revert back to like a status quo that has for centuries just been fucked up. Like, how do we continue to push for progress, but at the same time, like, not, do so in a way that adds to the division, so that again 4 years from now you just get another figure, or even Trump again, running, of just stoking these like negative sentiments,
And the fears, yeah.
successfully. Yeah, so
And
I think that's sort of the challenge, is like finding that kind of a balance, in
no,
my
that
opinion.
makes sense. And I think a lot of it is also, I feel like that subsection of the country, um, they weren't listened to, and I think that's why Trump was so successful at rallying them. So I think that what he means by that is now they have his ear as well too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's also going to be interesting because there's just so many issues that need to be dealt with. So it's like starting in one place pisses off this other group. Starting in this place pisses off this group. So I also think now is going to be a really important time for patience all around, even from the
Mm-hmm.
folks who are more like we need to keep up the momentum to push for some of these issues so that they don't just
Entire.
like fall to the back burner. But we also do need to be patient, because I think the more we, the more we're impatient, the more we then like mess things up for those actual issues. Because it's like, if we don't create an environment conducive to working together and making progress, then progress won't be made. If we're just constantly like, so I think that it's gonna be on both sides. Like, it's like, I think it's fair that we should push back against this new administration on things, and like expect that they're gonna keep up the momentum that we've kind of given to them. But at the same time, like, we also need to be patient on our end, to make sure that we recognize that there is a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of emotions in the air, and that put we don't want to pull too hard in one direction so that the whole thing just rips.
No, no, entirely. And I mean, it's just going to be, I mean, it's just, I think we have to just remember that it's about progress, not perfection, you know? And I think that for us to get to that point where everyone is taken care of, it's not going to happen in 4 years. It may not even happen in 8 or 12, maybe not even in our lifetime, but it's good that we're taking forward steps. You know what I'm saying? Like I was mentioning before at the beginning of this, I feel like we were at a place where we were just like electric sliding backwards, you know what I mean? Moonwalking, where it was just like, whoa, what is really going on. And I think that you can also see it from the world leaders who are also quick to congratulate Biden, Kamala Harris. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think it's not only about the American people that's also gonna benefit from having a new person in office, but also like on a global scale. Now conversations and different forms of allyship can continue to prosper.
Yeah, for sure. I
I feel
mean,
like it's
yeah,
like it's more, you know.
all of that is true. Like, we just have an opportunity again to like actually, like, before it was like everything was stacked against us. Like, there were forces actively pushing back against progress. Now it's like we're not necessarily pushing forward, but at least we're in a space where like the um, like communication is open again. The possibility of collaboration is open again. Like, science matters again. Like, like all of these
You
things
know,
where it's like
and that's what the
all
past
of
four
this
years
is
taught me
clearly.
too. It was just like, I mean, with in this age of information and digital transformation, these past four have also just showed me that there's, I mean, and I haven't heard this term in a while, but like that whole alternative facts, you know, like I didn't realize that that was something that people were really living by, you know,
Well, I
and
mean,
it's scary to just think about just the way certain stories or just truth can just be distorted when we have so much access to information at our fingertips. So I'm also happy that we can now get down to a point where we don't also have to just question every single thing that's happening. Of course, we can still scale back. We don't have to believe everything, but it's now at a point where it's like we don't have to do these mental gymnastics anymore, which is also going to just like give us a sense of mental clarity and peace.
well, I mean, the thing about that too, though, is also like, we'll see how these next few months play out. Because even the fact that we were celebrating yesterday, and it was like, well, the AP reports that that the race is over and that Biden has won, that's not a fact to a subsection of Americans who are supporters of Trump. And I'm sure some of those folks, I mean, it remains to be seen, obviously, how this is all going to play out. And again, like, and I talked about this last week, and I feel it again, even with the celebrations yesterday, of like, I do think there's a communal sense of like, nah, it's over, like, like just like fuck out of here, right? But at the same time, even with that sense, like, the implications that come with these alternative facts are still going to play out, because in the minds of some
1000%.
people, there is no new president. In the minds of some people, like, everything Trump is saying, which to us looks like desperate and like, oh, like clearly, like, what are you talking about? To some of his followers, it's still that is still the facts, you know. So, and it does remain to be seen exactly how long it takes, or what the transition of power actually looks like from from like this, like, all these alternative fact pushers to, like, you know, the folks who are verifiably have won, right? Like, it's going to be interesting to see, because to even navigate that, there either has to be an acknowledgement of the fact that one side is telling the truth and one isn't, or there has to somehow be a way where, like, both of those narratives can coexist. And so it's going to be interesting to watch that play out over the next few months, and see exactly what happens.
No, entirely. But yeah, I'm just happy that's just a different energy in the air. You know, it
I will
feels
say
good.
the other things that come to mind, like two other things which I was thinking about. One is,
Mm-hmm.
like, I think it's important to note, especially for, and I mean, especially for myself, for you, for probably most of the folks who would be watching this, like, we are privileged enough to, like, a lot of times be affected more so by a lot of the issues that we talk about, more theoretically or ideologically than like life or death stakes. Like, you know, over the past 4 years, a lot has happened. My life has never been directly threatened. There's been things which, like, push towards, like, oh, that could lead to that, which would then threaten my life. But my life has never been directly
Yeah.
threatened. Whereas there are folks whose lives have been directly threatened. And so I think when I talk about this idea of, like, keeping the momentum up, I think that's sort of where it is important that there are folks in our generation, you know, from backgrounds similar to us, who it makes sense to lighten up a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, the way I look at it is like, there's still basic needs that just need to be met. Till those basic needs
Yep.
are met, they have to be at the forefront of the mind. And somewhat related to that, I would say, like, a really great interview has been going around recently by AOC, where she's talked a lot about sort of the future of the Democratic Party, and this idea that, like, whenever these elections happen, you know, the Democratic Party, for whatever reason, their takeaway is always like, oh, you know, like, too many of this group went for Trump, so we need to start appealing to this group more and more. And it's like, no, we had record levels of voter turnout, and that's really what pushed for Biden winning. So it's like, no, you actually need to look at these more disenfranchised communities and realize that they're the ones who are delivering this victory, and they're the ones who need to be, you know, focused on. Even with, you know, certain races, right, where it's like AOC is like, you know, I offered to help in every single races. I helped in 5 races. Those 5 races all won. I didn't help in the other ones. Those ones all lost. And like, this idea that the Democratic establishment needs to realize that, like, their success, like, even if they're trying to play it politically and are not invested in giving people what they need, their political success is going to be tied into giving people what they need. Like, ultimately, like, the power is in the people's hands in that sense, and you can't, like, even Medicare for all, like, there you could look and see the exact things where it's like, all the Democrats who pushed for it won, all the ones who pushed against it didn't win. So it's like all of these things that, you know, politics as usual. Like, I think we're past politics as usual, and there is, like, a lot.
We definitely
there is a very big, yeah, there's a very big community of people who are just way more informed and invested in these issues. But if those folks aren't addressed in the next 4 years, then, you know, they're going to go back to not voting, because they're not going to see themselves. Some of them are going to go back to not voting because they're not going to see themselves being represented or having their needs met. So I think that's the other challenge, is like, not only celebrating the victory, but also recognizing, like, where did this victory come from, and how do we build upon this victory, even if you don't want to do it for the ideological, or like the ideals that I hold. At least do it for the fact that if you don't do it, people are going to vote you out. Like, you're not going to stay in power if you don't appeal to the people.
Yeah, there's too many career politicians. I think that what needs to change is like the length of certain terms, and if like you haven't actually, if you position yourself more so as a roadblock for things actually improving, then it's just I think we're at a point where it's like someone new just needs to just step in those shoes at this point. Yeah, so I think we are beyond just politics as usual, and more people are just. I think I was mentioning last week, like I was even having a conversation about politics with my grandmother, and that wasn't something that I was doing far too often before. I mean, of course, when Obama was elected and running for president, that was always a big conversation in my community. But I think that even the conversations I'm having with certain people, you can just tell people are becoming more politically aware. They're opening their eyes and trying to leverage their voice in a way that can actually push forward for what they want. So I think that there's no way we could go back, and I do think that with this upcoming administration, the difference is that people are gonna they because we as a people realize the power that we've had for this election in order for the result to be in favor of the Democrats. It's kind of just like, hey, like remember us, and I think that that's gonna be something that isn't going to be scaled back over these next four. I think in those first 2 or 3 days, like immediate change or things that are written with executive order has to just come into play, honestly. And I think that there's every single day is going to be important for people to sort of get across what they want for their community, and for themselves.
Yeah,
I feel
definitely. And I
like
mean,
there's just no waiting. There's just no waiting anymore at this point. It's kind of just like, and I think we also realize, especially with Corona, that of course life is precious, but it's just like we just don't know, like just the amount of time or how many do overs we can have, because if Trump got elected again, it's just like, whoa, this would have been a very interesting rabbit hole that we would have hopped into.
yeah,
So it's like we
yeah. I
don't
mean, I
know
think
who's next and being energized for that 2024 presidential run.
definitely. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like liberation and like societal revolution, like we just have to realize, and I think a lot of folks have realized over the past few years that like it starts with yourself and with the people around you and with your community, and it's not necessarily like the highest level, right? Like nobody should be looking to the administration at this point and being like, all right, like they won, they're going to take care of us. Like we have to recognize that all of these things begin, with with the communities that are around us and that we're a part of. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's to your point. Like there's a lot of stuff that we've learned over the past 4 years, which are going to apply, and I think
Yeah.
that we're just going to have to continue to apply that and continue to recognize that that's where it starts, right? Like that it doesn't start with just like who's president, but it really starts with like yourself and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to make people's lives easier and to contribute to change.
Yep. No, entirely. I know you also want to. I know when we were discussing before, you also wanted to touch on some of the things that were passed on individual states.
Yeah, I mean there was a few I saw. I will say I know I talked about Massachusetts ranking ranked choice in the voting that ended up not passing. So that was interesting to see that play out. I think one of the more interesting ones I saw was that Oregon decriminalized drugs across the
Yes.
board. So basically, yeah, there's like I forget the exact amount, but pretty much any drug you can have that drug, and instead of being facing criminal charges, you essentially have to pay a fine and then go to counseling or some like
Mm-hmm.
rehab type deal. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. I mean, I thought that was. I'm very curious to see how it plays out. Again, another
Mm-hmm.
area where I'm cautiously optimistic because I do think like societally the idea that we take folks who have substance use issues and turn them into criminals as opposed to turn them into folks who are dealing with issues and who need support like patients or like folks in need of medical help is an issue. Is a major issue, really. I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad to see that, and I'm really excited to watch it play out. I think again, it's a lot of it is just a lot of these things just come down to narrative and patience, right? So it's like if Oregon
And
sees
it's something new that we haven't experienced as a country before, also.
exactly, and like with that, right? It's like if this particular case study, I guess, doesn't turn out the most successful, then you know there's going to be people who are like, well, they tried it in Oregon and it failed, right? And like, so we need to,
Yeah.
just like, that's not the right answer. So I think that across the board is going to be really interesting, not even just specifically with Oregon. And again, we can talk a little bit more about that because I'd be curious your thoughts about that approach. But I'd say just in general, like, there's going to be a lot of new things, new policies, etc., that are more progressive minded or more just like different than the way that we've done things in the past. And I think there has to be a level of patience and not a level of like all or nothing with some of those things where it's like, oh, that didn't work, so let's never try that again. Which can happen sometimes. It's a
Which
challenge.
can happen, yeah. I am happy with the fact that it looks like by Oregon voting that way, the focus is going to be on rehabilitation. You know what I mean? And that's going to be important for this country because that's also another talk that we have about certain disenfranchised communities. Like, hey, people just need help instead of being criminalized. Whether it's like even having community centers for people to even have activities and stuff to do. It's just like having that be the case study, and I'm optimistic that it's gonna uh, go well or work out in a way where it's not where people are gonna realize like, hey, the state didn't just burn down. You know what I mean? Because drugs were legal, and I think that's where a lot of the fear comes into play. Or like, hey, crime is extremely up. I think that those numbers are gonna those numbers are gonna just have interesting stories that we can take from that. But I also do think that each state also functions differently too. Like, I'm curious to see the way that that would work in a place like New York, or even just in a city with over 8 million people, or probably at like 6 million now that people probably moved out, compared to it being in a place like Oregon with their population. I feel like with certain cities and states, they're going to be late to the party because of the different population dynamics too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this is a little tangential, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I saw a great like visual, right, which shows like a lot of times when you see maps of who voted red versus who voted blue, you'll see
Mm-hmm.
like it looks like a huge section of the country voted red, and then like there's just these little pockets of blue.
Mm-hmm.
But this I saw this great visual which pointed out like, well, land can't vote, right? So like if you just remove like if you like take out all the empty space on that and you actually look at it, then it shows that like yeah, like where people congregate, for the most part, goes blue, and like these more isolated places go red. So kind of tangential, but I do think to your point, like there the
That's interesting.
experiences of different things just like manifest differently based on a lot. I mean the environment around you, and like a big part of that is just sort of population density and like the people around you. Um, so yeah, I don't know, little tangential, but that's what that made me think of. I also
Mm-hmm.
will say like
Yeah, and
another. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, you got it.
I was gonna say another thing, also tangential, but like another thing which I thought was great to see was just like a lot more representation at the lower levels in terms of like folks who made the House of Representatives and this and that, in terms of like sexual orientation and racial and ethnic background. Like we just saw a lot more. We're seeing a shift where politics is becoming more representative, um, of the actual demographics of America, as the demographics of America also continue to shift away from
Entirely.
there being as much of a clear majority. So that was another thing I'd say like that isn't that on a lower level. Like honestly, from a higher level, like I would have loved, no disrespect, like taking away by like just like living in a vacuum, right? I would have loved the fact
Uh-huh.
that we pushed back so hard against Trump that our next president wasn't another white man after years and years of just white man, white man, white man. So, and obviously, with that being said, like the vice president, we're setting all sorts of new grounds there. So, across the board, there's been a lot more representation. I think obviously there's a lot more work to do, and I would love to see that represented at the highest
Mm-hmm.
level. But at the same time, like we are going to see change happen more when it happens at the lower levels and when it happens at like, you know, not just, we don't need, like we've seen what happens when we've had a black president, but we also now have record numbers of you know, other government officials who are from different backgrounds, and I feel like the latter is more important in terms of the whole system and how the whole system
entirely. And I do think that we can never discount the fact that so many people now are politically charged and want to sort of get into office, want to be that change in their community too. So we're going to see that play out pretty well over these next 8 to 12, I hope, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, we just got to remember though that. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, we just got to remember that it's like, you know, politics is going to be politics. Like, you know,
yes.
We can celebrate the political victories yesterday, and I had to recognize that myself. I had to be like, I can't be throwing a damper. People deserve to celebrate. There's a lot, you
of course you got
a lot to be happy about. But it's also like, God damn, man, like how messed up are we that we're like, yay, like the like science matters again. Like, damn, man, like we got some shit to do if we're celebrating science matters again. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got work
But
to
that's
do.
what I'm saying. That was the rabbit hole that we were going in, and yeah, the celebration came to the fact where it's like, okay, we no longer have to slide down this go down this slide anymore, you know?
It's like we hit the brakes right before we went all the way over the cliff. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't even in that sense. It wasn't even as much like a real celebration as much as it was like just like a cathartic. It was like a collective sigh of relief. But yeah, so
I'm curious to see the way that the international community is taking it too. Like where they're like, because everyone knows that Trump wasn't the best figured leader for the world, and a lot of his policies affected many just different countries. So I'm curious to see the way that news has also been reported too. I have to actually look up some international news sites and see the way that they're assessing this news too.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna be the fucking crazy ones in the conversation anymore. So that alone is, I'm sure everyone is. I'm sure the international community has to be happy that they're not dealing with the wild card that is Donald Trump. And I mean, again, like we'll see how this wild card continues to play out. There's a lot of supporters on his end who, even regardless of him, like I think we're starting to see like he looks desperate, right? Like he looks like he's like, oh fuck, like, I mean, you got to think about it too from like the context he's operating in. Like this dude didn't think he was gonna win when he first started running. You know what I'm saying? It got so deep, bro. Now he's like all the way in there to the point where like Secret Service.
He probably didn't think he was gonna lose at all.
Yanking out, man. But yeah, even regardless of that, like there is, like we've already seen violence brought about by Trump supporters while Trump was in office. So I do think we all, you know, just need to be cautious. Just need to be aware of the fact that like there are definitely Americans out there who are
on
ready
a different type of time
and willing to like, yeah, we're on a different type of time. Exactly. Who are ready and willing to like to fight on behalf of what they feel is the great injustice of Donald Trump having won the election and having all of these fake votes come in, and you know, like all like whatever narrative he's spinning, right? Like there is definitely a subsection of people who are down to fight for that narrative. So you just gotta be cautious.
And I think it's also important to recognize that those people exist too, you know. So we're not living in a world where we think everything is just candy, you know.
Same, bro. And I mean, like, and there's a lot of folks in our community, our respective communities. I wouldn't say the free folk community, because I would say generally the free folk community does tend to, you know, live these truths on a day-to-day basis. But there's a lot of folks, I think, in our respective communities who are like the type who will fail to recognize that, who it really is just like, 5-1, it's over. Like we're back to normal. Like and I do think it is important to remember like what normal was. Like me personally, in fact, I remember there was almost a catharsis when Trump was elected because I was like, oh, okay, like the world is fucked up, but at least now the world looks fucked up because this dude is president. And now it's like the world is still going to be in some ways fucked up, and like
Mm-hmm.
need to be issues are going to need to be addressed even when we don't have that to point and look at. Anyway, I feel like I'm kind of talking in circles about that point, but that is definitely like sort of my one big thing right now in the back of my and in the back of my mind or just in my heart
Yeah,
where
and
I'm
I'm
just
pretty
like
sure a lot
really
of
kind
people
of
share a similar sentiment. So whether you feel like you're speaking in a circle or not, I definitely feel like there's people who are right there with you.
and it comes from and like I will say too, like I had to recognize on mine. It's like I don't want to be the damper in this moment. Like we need to have this, but I also think it has to come on the other side too of people who are celebrating and are looking at people like there is a group of people who are like, hey guys, stop celebrating. Like think about this, think about this, think about this. And while I understand the temptation to be like, yo, can y'all just let us have this? You have to recognize that a lot of those people, the reason that they're saying things like that is because they are worried they're going to be left alone down the line. They're worried that they're going to be the only ones fighting. So if anything, it's just more this reassurance of like, guys, we know that. Like, don't worry, we're gonna still be with you when shit continues to play out. We're having this moment, but we're still going to be with you. So I do think both of that. I do think that needs to be said too for those people. Like, there's nothing wrong with not wanting to celebrate or with like there's nothing wrong feeling anything that you're feeling right now. Really, at the end of the day.
Entirely. Yeah, that was good. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Any
uh,
Sunday shout
any
outs on
Sunday
your end?
shout outs to all the poll workers. Honestly, one of my friends, Corey, he was working like a 16-hour shift, and I'm over here like, whoa, that's
Yo,
extremely impressive. Like, thank you for your service. Seriously.
yeah, shouts out to them. I'd
How
say
about you?
shout out to all the first time voters out there. I know there was a lot of them,
Yes.
not just the youth, definitely the youth, but also like folks who are older who have never voted before. So shouts out to everyone who made their voice heard in a way that they haven't before. Um, Shouts out to the Native American community because this is still your land that we're all on. So like, hey, shouts out to y'all, man. Like for real, like nothing. I can't even put that aspect of it into words. Like that community in particular, for them to have come out and played such a pivotal role in some of these states as they did, it's really like it's grace, bro. It's like straight up grace. You know what I'm saying? Like this is their
Oh,
land that
1,000.
came in and stole, and for them to still be participating in these made up these like at the end of the day, it's just all made up. You know what I'm saying? Like there's no and I will say the other thing to backtrack a little bit. Like the other thing is I'm curious to see is like we know that the way that we vote and the way that elections are done needs to be updated, right? The problem is that like for instance, Trump is going to push this voter fraud narrative and like there was hacking in like some of these votes, and we know that it's not true in the extent that he's saying it. But we also have to recognize that like yeah, there were probably like the system is easily manipulatable,
Manipulate, yeah,
easily
entirely.
manipulated. Yeah. So so yeah, I think, but it's like what point do we can we address that aspect of things because it's like now the Democrats are in power and they
We're
don't
gonna,
want to
we're gonna have
necessarily
to add it. We're gonna have to add it to one of the list of things for us to just manage and address. That's all. We gotta just add that
straight
to the
up.
list.
But the problem is that I feel like the whoever's in power typically won't want to address that issue because in doing so, they almost like recognize that a little bit of illegitimacy in them winning, even if they would have won anyway. Like there's still like a little bit. Like for instance, if the Democrats were to go back out and be like, "We need to fix all this," then that's just ammo for folks who are like, "Yeah, you need to fix it because you didn't actually win because it's messed." You know what I'm saying? Like there's certain issues where it's not necessarily in the best interest of the folks who are currently in power to want to
Yeah,
highlight that as an
and I
issue.
think a lot of
That's
that's
one.
with career politicians too, though. That's what I'm saying. Like with a lot of the new wave activists, a lot of the people who are now politically charged, they're realizing all of those faults. So they may have to. Sometimes you have to play the game in order to change it. You know what I mean?
That's real. It's a bar.
Uh, gotta leave them with something. But thank you again, guys, for joining. Peace and blessings to you all. Yeah, and then until next Sunday. Also, too, Season 4 is going to begin this Wednesday. I don't know. We haven't mentioned that at all. So, yeah, season 4 kicking off this Wednesday. First episode. I guess people will just see the preview tomorrow. I don't want to give out too much information, but I'm very, very excited for us to start releasing content in that form again.
Yeah, we got another potential exciting announcement coming this week as well.
Yes.
Big things going on. Yeah, everyone breathe easy. Enjoy your Sundays. All love.
All love. Peace and blessings, everyone. Till next Sunday.